Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, trying to ameliorate the awfulness that is 2020. I have written 3 FARSCAPE short stories altogether. I've read 2 of them in this series, now I'm going to read the third. FARSCAPE, for those of you who don't remember, 20 years ago, was a show that aired on Sci-Fi. The premise, as I've said before, was very similar to that of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. It was about a contemporary human, in this case one from 1999, who built his own space shuttle called FARSCAPE 1. And he took it out for a test flight in orbit of Earth and encountered a wormhole which shot him halfway across the galaxy. And he went on adventures from there. He wound up on a living ship called Moya, which was a Leviathan ship, is what it was called. It was basically a giant ship that was alive. There was one pilot who sort of lived in a symbiotic relationship, and then there were a bunch of other people on the ship with him as well, including a soldier, a Luxan warrior, a Delvian priest, and a Hynerian monarch, all of whom were criminals, or deemed criminals at least. And then later they added another one, a young woman named Chiana. Anyway, and other people came and went throughout the course of the 4 years the show was on the air. I did a lot of work with FARSCAPE. I wrote a novel called House of Cards. I wrote stories in each of the first 2 issues of FARSCAPE the magazine. Later I wrote the official continuation of the TV show in comic book form, collaborating with the show's creator, Rocky O'Manon. What I'm going to read for you today is a story that went in the FARSCAPE role-playing game, which Alderac Entertainment Group published in 2001. And they came to me and asked me if I would do a short story that would go at the very beginning of the RPG, which was a nifty idea and one I really enjoyed doing. So this one is called 10 Little Aliens, and it takes place during the first season of the show. Will you look at all those ships? John Crichton stared out of the porthole of the Leviathan transport pod in amazement. What he saw could only be described as a spaceship junkyard, looking for all the world like the old Margolin house that he and DK used to play in as kids. Crichton even recognized a couple of ships. One looked like a peacekeeper prowler, another similar to the Atlantic cruiser Moya had come across a few weeks back. But most were as unfamiliar as, well, hell, he thought, as unfamiliar as every damn thing's been since that wormhole shoved me and FARSCAPE 1 to the other side of nowhere. Sitting next to him in the cockpit of the pod, Ka Dargo suddenly thrust out one of his large arms. There! The Luxan military yacht! You sure about this, big guy? Crichton asked. Dargo fixed him with a penetrating gaze. I know the ships of my people. Just checking. Wouldn't want to waste the trip. If you're so concerned, you should have stayed on Moya. Hey, I need practice co-piloting one of these babies. Besides, you needed someone to play Chewbacca to your Han Solo. Dargo grunted. Promise me that one day your ridiculous babbling will begin to make sense. Crichton grinned at him. Moya had come across this collection of powerless vessels a full solar day before. When they found a Luxan ship amid the other derelicts, Dargo had insisted on trying to board it to see if it held any map fibers that could show them the way to his homeworld. Dargo had a similar opportunity recently, but chose to rescue Crichton and Aaron from Zenitan pirates instead. Crichton, who was still somewhat inexperienced with the transport pods, let Dargo do the driving while he gazed out of the porthole and took a closer look. It was eerie, really, seeing all these ships of so many colors, designs, shapes, and sizes, yet they were all lifeless. Running lights extinguished, no motion except for inertial drift. Hey, Dargo, you notice something weird? Besides the fact that you've gone almost 50 microts without saying anything idiotic? Smiling sardonically, Crichton said, I love you too. No, really, look around. I see dead ships, Dargo said impatiently. Yeah, and why do ships usually die? Sparing an angry glance, Dargo said, when they're damaged beyond repair. Crichton, if you do not stop pestering me. Right, damaged, Crichton continued, ignoring Dargo's increasingly belligerent tone. So look at these ships. How much damage you see? Dargo peered at the porthole, then looked down at the readouts on his console. None, he said in an unusually quiet voice. Exactly. Now, this is some kind of resting place for ex-ships, fine, but it seems to me that at least some of them should have, like, hull breaches or weapon scarring or parts broken off, right? Dargo shook his head. It doesn't matter. We're going to board the Luxon ship. Crichton was about to argue, then thought better of it. The big guy isn't going to listen to me anyhow, so why waste my breath? Instead, he activated his comms. Pilot, do me a favor. Scan for any power emissions. The gentle voice of the being who controlled all of Moya's functions sounded over the comm's tiny speakers. I already told you, Commander Crichton, that none of the ships are showing any kind of power output. Not from the ships, pilot. I mean any power emissions in the area. A pause greeted him. Scanning now, pilot said at last. Aaron cut in. What is it you're looking for, Crichton? A little man behind the curtain. None of these ships look broken. No ruptures or blast marks or anything of the sort. Maybe this isn't a junkyard at all. Maybe there's some kind of power drain in the area that trapped all the ships. You're farbot, Crichton, Rigel said. What kind of yachts would think of something like that? Apparently the kind of yachts in this star system, Pilot interjected. Moya is detecting a small but steady power source on a planetoid at the precise epicenter of the field of ships. Dargo, we've got to turn back. No! We'll be at the Luxon ship within a few microns. Then we can... Dargo, if I'm right, it will be the first time. Now. This time Dargo cut himself off as he looked down at the console. Something's wrong. Our velocity is decreasing. He whirled on Crichton. What have you done? Nothing, Crichton said, checking his own console. Power levels are dropping faster than Clinton's pants. John, what's happening? Zan asked. Exactly what I thought, Crichton said. Something's draining power. There's an increase in power on the planetoid, Pilot said. It is in direct proportion to the power loss on the transport pod. We gotta get out of here, pronto. We can't! Dargo snarled, pounding the console. We don't even have sufficient power to change course back to Moya. Something else, Pilot said. Moya is also reading life signs on several of the ships, but at a very low level as people on board in stay. Pilot, you're breaking up. Don't go. Can't. Zan, repeat. We didn't get that. Silence. Whatever's affecting the pod is also affecting the comms, Dargo rumbled. Is there anything we can do to get out of this? Dargo pounded the console in exasperation. If there was, I'd be doing it. Crichton looked down. All the biomechanical controls in front of him were about as useless as a Lego set. In frustration, he cast his gaze out on the field of dead ships and let out a gasp. Dargo, look over there! What? That big ship, look familiar? Dargo squinted at the large black shape. The pod continued to drift forward, carried by its own inertia. Within a few microns, the large shape, which had earlier been obscured by 3 or 4 other smaller vessels, came into full view. In a low, dangerous voice, Dargo said, That is Crais' command carrier. Yeah, and it's just as dead as the others. The interior lights started to dim. Only problem is, so are we. There has to be some way that we can... Before Dargo could finish the sentence, he disappeared. No flash of light, no weird effect, nothing. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. The only indication that anything had happened was the popping sound made by the air rushing into the space he had occupied. Crichton blinked. Okay, this is very bad. This is very, very bad. This is very, 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 very bad. The lights grew dimmer. This is even worse than when he and Aaron were trapped in the flax. Then at least they had emergency lighting. At this rate, though, the lights would be completely out inside of 10 microns. Plus, of course, in the flax, he'd had Aaron's company. Then, he wasn't on the pod anymore. As with Dargo, there was no flash of light, no feeling of disorientation. He just found himself somewhere else. Somewhere else appeared to be a planet. He stood in a clearing about 40 meters in diameter, surrounded by trees with blue bark and bright orange leaves. Strange reddish-yellow grass covered the ground, while a large hill lay about half a mile or so away. Several purple winged figures flew overhead, but Crichton couldn't make out any details. He couldn't hear any noise at all. A cluster of figures also occupied the clearing. Crichton counted 9. Some belonged to species he recognized. The first was a Xiang, a lizard-like race of fire-breathers that they had encountered while trying to salvage the Zelbinian. Another was a Zenitan, the race of pirates responsible for the flax that had almost killed him and Aaron. A third was an Atlantic, a race similar to Luxon's, probably from the ship that Crichton recognized. A fourth was a Delvian male. Like Zan, he had blue skin, but unlike Zan, had a full head of white hair. 3 others Crichton didn't recognize, but they included a 4-legged creature loosely described as a cross between a panther and an alligator, an amorphous blob of gelatinous red goo, and a large ponderous beaked thing wearing a large black cloak. Crichton was all too familiar with the final 2 figures. One, of course, was Dargo. The other was the Peacekeeper captain who had hounded him since he first ricocheted into this corner of the galaxy, Crais. When the wormhole spit Crichton out, his module collided with a Peacekeeper prowler piloted, he later learned, by Crais' brother. Crais had also been in charge of Moya when the Leviathan had escaped. In the months since then, their lives had been a constant chase through the uncharted territories, as Crais stopped at nothing to hunt them down. He saved particular vehemence for Crichton, whom he blamed for the death of his brother. Being teleported to an alien planet by some unknown entity wouldn't deter Crais in the least. Crichton tried to move toward Dargo, but the act triggered a fierce electrical charge which kept him frozen in place. "Don't bother," a voice spoke directly into Crichton's brain. "You're surrounded by a force field." When Crichton opened his mouth to speak to Dargo, the voice cut in. "Don't bother trying to talk either. Sound doesn't travel outside the force field. You don't move till I say you move. So don't move, all right?" "Fine, whatever. What's going on here?" "At the moment, nothing. But now that you and the Luxon have shown up, we can begin." "Begin what?" "Give me a mic rod, will you? I'll explain." Crichton really wished the voice belonged to a body, or at least a face. The face behind that voice desperately needed a sock to the jaw. "See, you're here because you were damn fool enough to come into the field. Every time someone does, they pluck one representative from whatever races are on the ship. They bring him down and bung everyone else into stasis. What, stick him in the field and have him choose up sides for softball?" The voice seemed to chuckle. "Not far off, actually, if I'm understanding the images I'm getting in your brain. Basically, once they get 10 of them, who's they? What are you, dense? The people who brought you here. Look, don't interrupt, all right? It's hard enough to get my signals through your translator microbes, okay? Sorry. Where was I? Yeah. Once they get 10, they bring them to this planetoid. See, this is an island. Only landmass on the planetoid. Actually, that hill over there is right in the middle of it." "Great," Crichton muttered. "So you 10 are charged with going out and finding the prize. Whoever gets the prize wins." "Wins what?" Another chuckle. "Get the prize and you'll find out." "We're supposed to work together, apart, what?" "It's up to you. 2 of you find the prize, you both win. All 10, you all win. It varies. You know, and it's different every time. In fact, we've got 2 new races this go-round. You and the Halosian. That's the chap with the beak." Crichton rolled his eyes. "Christ, what is this, a Star Trek episode? They're testing us to see if we're worthy of the gift or some crap like that?" No, nothing like that. They're just bored, is all." A third chuckle. "The prize is in the center. Good luck." With that, the voice disappeared. And so did the force field. As soon as it went down, Dargo unsheathed his Qualta blade. Crais unsheathed his pulse pistol. The Zenitan produced his own weapon. The panther/alligator stood on its hind legs, and the Xiang took a deep breath. "Whoa! Hold it! Take it easy!" Crais' face split into a snarl. "Crichton!" He fired his pistol, to no effect. Crais tried several more times, but nothing happened. "All out of bullets," Crichton said in his best Elmer Fudd voice. "Now can we stop with the macho posturing crap and figure out how we're supposed to get out of this?" Screaming, Crais threw down the pistol and charged at Crichton. Dargo stepped in front of Crichton, his Qualta pointed directly at Crais. The Peacekeeper sensibly halted his charge. "Do not come between me and my vengeance, Dargo." Dargo smiled a vicious smile. "I was more concerned with my vengeance, Peacekeeper." And he fired his Qualta. Or, rather, tried to. It worked as well as Crais' pistol. "Okay, weapons are obviously a big ol' no-no," Crichton said. "Not entirely." Dargo touched a stud on the hilt of his Qualta, and it reverted from blaster to sword form. "My blade can still separate this Punka's head from his shoulders." Suddenly, Crichton felt a blast of heat. He whirled to see the Xiang spit a huge ball of fire right at Beak Guy. What did Voice of Doom call him? Halitosis or something? Caught flat-footed, assuming he had feet under his big cloak, Beak Guy let out an agonized squawk as the flames burned him to a crisp. The Xiang held up his hands. "Don't worry. I have no intention of attacking any of the rest of you. But that Helosian fired on my vessel when we were on a legitimate salvage operation. I owed him that. Great, Crichton muttered. Now are we done with the macho chest beating? He pointedly looked at Crais, who eyed him savagely from behind Dargo's blade. In a hiss-like whisper, the Panthigator said, "We have been given our task. The prize is at the center. The hill is at the center. I will go to the center and claim the prize. I will win. You will lose." With that, it dashed elegantly into the orange forest on all fours at rather astonishing speed. Idly, Crichton wondered if they all talked in a simple declarative sentences or if this one just used it as a shtick. "I am willing to make you a deal, Dargo." Crais spoke in a much calmer voice. Crichton took a good look at Crais and noticed that the captain hadn't shaved recently. His goatee was untrimmed, and stubble darkened his cheeks. I get the feeling that violates some PK dress code or other. Obviously, Crais' single-minded pursuit of Moya was getting the better of him. "A deal." "Yes," Crais said. "I will allow you your freedom. You'll be exonerated of the charge of murdering your wife and be reunited with your son. All I ask in exchange is him." Crais didn't so much as say as sneer that last word. Crichton tensed. Seeing his son again was more important to Dargo than anything. And it wasn't as if Crichton and Dargo were best friends anyway. Hell, back on Dumbada Depot, we pretty much admitted that we probably could never be friends. Then Dargo shook his head. "Typical. You think that I would make a deal with my jailer and betray a friend? Perhaps that is the way of your foul kind, peacekeeper. But..." Dargo's words were interrupted by a screeching sound. Crichton looked up and saw one of the winged purple creatures swooping down. As it got closer, Crichton saw that it looked much bigger than he first thought. Like a pteranodon on acid, with big purple wings, talons the size of Montana, and a very long beak. It dove straight down into the trees and rose a few moments later with another screech, clutching the Panthigator in its talons. The alien struggled vainly as the bird thing ripped it to pieces and flew off out of sight. "Okay, this keeps getting interesting." The Delvian gazed at the dense woods. "The Chitala was a fool. Come, we shall go in a group." The Xiang, the Zenitan, and the Alanic exchanged glances. "I won't go with her." The Xiang spit with a disdainful look at the Zenitan. "She's just a pirate." "Look who's talking," the Zenitan said, scratching her beard stubble. The Alanic walked up to the Delvian. "I shall accompany you. Perhaps the Zim will be sated with its meal of a Chitala. If not," the Alanic added, pulling a small stick that telescoped out into a good-sized bow staff out of her pocket, "we shall deal with it." Unholstering a dagger, the Zenitan said, "I'm in, provided the Xiang and the peacekeepers stay here. I don't like Xiang, and I really don't like peacekeepers." Crais wasn't even paying attention. "What is your answer, Dargo?" "I thought that was obvious, Crais. I will never make a deal with the likes of you." "Looks like we're stuck in Mexican standoff territory here, Crais." Crichton peered over Dargo's large shoulder, content to keep the big guy between him and the PK captain. "I'll let these fools play their games," the Delvian waved dismissively. "Let us go." He went into the forest, followed by the Alanic and the Zenitan. The Xiang stayed behind, grumbling to himself. The red goo hadn't spoken or moved since the force fields went down. "Look, we need to come up with some kind of plan," Crichton said. "We can't just stand here glowering at each other. If we're not careful..." Another screech. Crichton looked up to see 3 more Zims swooping down. "Aw, jeez," Crichton moaned. "This isn't looking good." Sure enough, the 3 avians flew right back out, each clutching one of the prisoners. The Alanic and the Zenitan put up a good fight, but the Zim had completely disemboweled the Delvian. At least, Crichton assumed the Delvian had bowels. He made a mental note to ask Zan. The Zenitan's neck was soon sliced open by a Zim talon, but the Alanic woman had managed to beat her attacker to the point where its talons loosened. That may have been a mistake. With an angry shriek, the winged creature released her, and she went plummeting toward the ground. For the first time, the red goo moved, slithering to a spot under the Alanic and spreading itself into a wider form. The Alanic landed on the goo, bleeding, but alive. The red goo spoke in a high-pitched voice. "Safe." "Nice work, Jello Man," Crichton said, and then muttered, "And then there were 6. The goo had more to say. "Approach bad. New way." The Xiang rumbled. "The cause speaks true. Simply approaching the forest doesn't seem to be working." "Maybe," Crichton nodded, "but..." He looked up to see the Zim was coming down again, this time making for the clearing. Specifically for the Alanic, which was still lying on top of the cause. "No!" Without thinking, he leapt toward the other two aliens. If he had thought about it, he'd have realized that getting between this nasty bird and its intended prey was suicidal. All it would do was grab him instead. Which was, in fact, what happened. "Crichton!" Dargo's powerful voice cried out as Crichton found himself suddenly airlifted. It was a lot like the time he and Dad went parasailing in the Bahamas when he was a kid. The rapid-fire rise upward, the loudness of the wind, the sudden bird's-eye view of the place where he'd been standing only moments before. Main difference, he thought, is that then I was in a harness, not a pair of purple talons that are about to rip me into tiny bits. As he felt the creature's grip tighten around his stomach, he looked down at the clearing and saw something that amazed him. Unfortunately, he was in no position to do anything about it. The others were, though. A fireball shot up from the ground, presumably from the Xiang's gullet. Unfortunately, it missed. Damn pirates can't even aim right. Crichton grimaced as the sharp points of the Zim's talons pierced his flight suit. Any second now, and I'll be astronaut shish kebab. Then something else rose up from the clearing. To Crichton's amazement, it was Dargo's blade. "You jackass, that'll leave you defenseless against Crais," he thought, as the Qualta whistled through the air towards him. Unlike the Xiang's fireball, Dargo's aim was true, and the blade went right through the Zim's head. A rather disgusting yellow substance splattered all around him as the dying monster started to tumble through the air and plummet toward the clearing. "Nice going, Dargo," Crichton thought. "Now instead of being cut to ribbons, I'll be a grease stain on yellow grass." Still in the grip of the talons, he couldn't even get a proper freefall posture. Thank God for astronaut training, or I'd probably be sick to my stomach by now. At the apogee of one tumble, Crichton noticed that he was falling not toward yellow, but red. "Jello Man! Great! He'll catch me, too!" The cause was wonderfully soft to land on, like a big red pillow. The Xiang immediately ran over and pried the talons loose, while Dargo retrieved his Qualta from the Zim's head. "Thanks, guys." Dargo wiped the Zim blood off the Qualta with his sleeve. "After you intervened on behalf of the Atlantic, we could do no less." "How is she?" Crichton said as he got up off the cause. "Ow!" he added as a sharp pain sliced through his torso. "What is it?" the Xiang asked. "Cracked a couple ribs. I'll be fine." He waved the Xiang off. "The Atlantic is unconscious," Dargo said, "but she should be fine." Crichton nodded. "Listen, I figured out what we..." This time the screech came not from a Zim, but from Crais. With Dargo temporarily removed as an impediment, the Peacekeeper leapt at Crichton with a blind fury. More pain shot through Crichton's entire body as his bruised form collided with the hard ground. "I will kill you once and for all, Crichton! You will..." Before he could finish the thought, Dargo's tongue lashed out to strike the Peacekeeper. Crais blinked once, then toppled over, unconscious. The Luxon then offered Crichton a hand up. "Thanks, man," he said as he took it. Then he said louder, "Ow! Ow! 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 Man, this hurts!" "We need to find a way to get the prize and get off this dren pit," Dargo said. "I think I figured out how," Crichton said through clenched teeth. The pain from his ribs was about 1,000 times worse after Crais' tackle. "I got a good look at this clearing from up yonder. It's a perfect circle." "So what?" the Xiang asked. "So omniscient narrator guy said that the prize was at the center. We all assume that it's on the hill since that's the center of the island. What if he means the center of the clearing?" Dargo looked dubiously at Crichton. "It can't be that simple." Crichton shrugged, then immediately regretted the motion. "Fine," he said. "You go ahead and walk to the hill. Watch out for falling Zims." "It cannot hurt to look," the Xiang said. The cause said nothing, but suddenly thinned itself out into a long strand that stretched across the diameter of the clearing. Then it compressed, an eerie reversal of the Atlantic's telescoping staff, into a small ball. "Epicenter here," it said. Grinning, Crichton said, "Excellent! Let's hear it for the great and powerful cause. Now, if we just dig a hole..." He looked over at Dargo, or more specifically, Dargo's Qualta. The Luxon rolled his eyes. "Fine." He got down on one knee and shoved his blade into the ground, as the cause rolled obediently out of the way. After repeating the motion several times, he and Crichton started clearing away the dirt, digging further into the ground. "This is ridiculous," the Xiang said. "Stand back. Let me handle this before I die of old age, waiting for you two to finish." Crichton quickly rose and backed up. Dargo did likewise. The Xiang took a deep breath, and then spit out a ball of fire even less impressive than the one he missed the Zim with. However, it was probably sufficient to get through the simple dirt and grass. Hope the prize is fireproof, Crichton thought, as the gaseous ball slammed into the dirt, igniting the nearby grass. To Crichton's surprise, the Cause made a beeline for the fire and smothered it, putting it out in fairly short order. I gotta get me one of them. Peering into the hole made by the Xiang's super halitosis, Crichton saw a stone the size of a fist. It was small and round and kind of dull. That's it? I nearly get cut in half by the one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater just so I can say, I got a rock? The trick's finding the prize, not the prize itself, isn't it? Oh, great. Crichton groaned, looking up, even though there was, as before, nothing to really see. You're back! So we dug up the rock. Now what? Well, you win. 4 of you get to go back to your ship, safe and sound, for good measure. All your injuries will be healed, and your ships will work just fine. Again, the chuckle. Good work, by the way. Usually people just bugger off to the hill and become Zim food. You allowed the first of about 4 or 5 cycles to get it right. Crichton snorted. Bully for us. What about Crais and the Atlantic? Dargo asked. And the others, for that matter. Well, the Sebastian and the Atlantic will be left here. It'll be up to their shipmates whether or not to rescue them. The others, they're dead, Luxon, so not a great deal's going to happen to them at this point, really. Good, Crichton said. That means we can get a head start on Crais while his command carrier picks him up. So that's all? The Xiang spread his stubby arms in protest. No bounty? No reward? The reward is you get to live, Xiang. And you got your revenge on the Halosians, so quit whining. All right, now get out of here so we can lure more ships in here. You're just going to keep doing this? Crichton asked, outraged. Yep, got to keep feeding the Zims somehow. Goodbye, human. Enjoy your trip back home. Wait a sec. You know about Earth? You can get me... Before Crichton could finish, he was back in the co-pilot seat on the transport pod. Home! Damn it! He turned to see the Luxon back in the pilot seat. Dargo, see if you can set a course for the planetoid. Are you insane? We have to get back to Moya and Starburst before Crais' command carrier can pursue. Dargo suited action to words as he programmed a course. But... As Crichton turned, he noticed that the pain of his cracked rib was gone. Really did heal all wounds. Hot damn. But if they know... He sighed. Nah, the big guy's right. It's not worth risking Crais capturing us. Besides, they may not know. Dargo, John, can you read us? Loud and clear, Zan. Crichton replied. Zan's sigh was audible over the comms. Thank the goddess. We're reading many of the ships powering up, and Pilot says that one of them is Captain Crais' command carrier. Yeah, we know. We bumped into our old buddy Bylar. We got a head start on him, though. He's out like a light on the planetoid, but we still need to starburst pronto. I don't understand. What happened? We'll give you the highlight reel when we're back on board. Which, Dargo added, will be in about 80 microns. Pilot, be ready to starburst the instant the docking web has us. Understood, Pilot said. Crichton cut the connection, then turned to Dargo. Did you mean what you said to Crais? When he told him I was your friend? Dargo did not look at Crichton as he rumbled, a warrior does not lie to his enemy in battle. Well, thanks, man. It means a lot. He looked at his readout. Approaching Moya, the docking web's got us. Releasing control to Pilot. Within microns, the hangar had pressurized, and Dargo and Crichton were walking toward the exit down the pathway between the various transport pods. FARSCAPE 1 and Aaron's Peacekeeper Prowler. Unable to resist, Crichton put his hand on Dargo's shoulder. Louis, this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Dargo's reply was lost as Moya went into Starburst. That was 10 Little Aliens, which was in the FARSCAPE role-playing game. I have no idea if you can still get this or not. It might be available from online dealers and used books and stuff. There's also some sites that have PDFs of gaming material, so it might be there too, so you may want to check that out as well. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Check me out online at DeCandido.net. Check out my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. Support me, please, if you can, on Patreon. There's lots of cool stuff there, and it's dirt cheap, and you get lots of great stuff. You get movie reviews, TV reviews, cat pictures, excerpts from my works in progress, vignettes featuring my original characters, and first looks at my first drafts. You definitely want to check that out. It's wonderful stuff, and it's not that expensive, and you'll love it all to pieces. I promise. Thank you very much, and please stay safe.